So the plan was to live stream the season 6 finale. I'm sure people saw me live today, do like watching the season 6 finale and like me screaming and crying about it, but I wasn't able to get any video from it. I wasn't even able to finish the stream. I think like I got taken down. I got my first warning for it today. So while I don't have like a live reaction to season 6 finale of Grey's Anatomy, it is still January 12th, 2025, and I have finished the season 6 finale of Grey's Anatomy. So the episode begins with Meredith, and Meredith has just peed on a stick and she's pregnant. Yay, good for her. So she tells Christina because that's her person, and she's like, okay, I have to stop by Derek's office and go and tell him. And then Christina and Callie are crying over their respective relationship ills. Callie has just broken up with Arizona because of all of the stuff with Arizona not wanting kids and Callie wanting kids. And Christina has finally kicked that redheaded devil man to the curb. Like the first episode starts with like Christina and Callie crying like crazy, which is pretty funny. And I was like, honestly, like that's pretty true to life. Like when you have a friend who's going through the same life shit that you are, sometimes that's the only person that you could be a mess in front of. So Meredith stops off at the office to go and tell Derek, but Derek's in a mood because he doesn't get to do surgeries anymore, and like the chief job is really weighing on him, so she doesn't tell him about the pregnancy. And right now, I'm mostly waiting for like the case of the week to show up. Because season 5 was all about like, oh, there was a man who got hit by a bus, and then oh shit, John Doe is George. So I'm assuming that at some point a patient will show themselves to be like the problem patient that is the source of all of this like agita around the season 6 finale. And then Mandy Moore shows up and I'm like, oh, I guess she's the patient. But the whole time, the guy from the lawsuit is like circling the hospital looking for Derek. And like it kind of seems like he just wants to talk to him, like he's being very chill, but everyone's just kind of like being dismissive of him because like even though like there is no like standout patient in the ER or in the pit or whatever, like they're all still very busy. So then this woman, Reed Adamson, like on the left, she runs into the guy and she's like, hey, like I need you to go like ask a nurse for this because like I have a patient coding or whatever. And she turns around and bam, she gets pew-pewed right in the head. And at that point I understand what the fuck I'm in for. And in the very next instance, best man Alex rounds the corner and then he gets a pew pew to the chest. And anybody who was in that live will tell you that I literally screamed. I think I scared my rabbit. I went, oh, and I was like, absolutely not. So then Alex, being a badass, he drags himself to the elevator and hits the door so he can like go and find some help. And then as that's happening, as like, Reed is dead and Alex is like trying to crawl away from like the active shooter experience, Lexi and Mark are having like their own like little thing, and Mark is like, oh, like are you into Alex? And I'm like, oh my god, you old ass man. Like leave this 24-year-old alone. And as this is happening in the background, a nurse goes like, hey, you can't go up there. And then bam, she gets pew-pewed and she's dead. So like Lexi's freaking the fuck out. Mark basically like grabs her and tries to bring her to safety, but then they find Alex in the elevator. So then they pull him into a room and they're trying to work on him in like one of the conference rooms. Meanwhile, at this point, Derek is like locking down the hospital. He doesn't know who the shooter is, but he's like, this needs to be dealt with. And the whole time, Meredith and Christina are just like wandering the hospital, like, oh, it's a lockdown, like, fuck it, whatever. And they talk about like their relationship stuff, and Meredith's like, I'm gonna go tell Derek that I'm pregnant now. Like it just seems like the right thing to do. This doesn't feel like something I should sit on. And Christina's like, oh, fuck it, I'll go with you. And then they make it to Derek, and Derek's like, what the fuck are you guys doing here? And he shoves them into a closet, and he's like, you guys are stay the hell put. I will come back for you. And this is after Derek tells Susie Pepper to stay in the office, and Susie Pepper does that. So at this point, I'm worried. I'm like, Derek is wandering the hospital, but the shooter got directions from Christina to the office, and Susie Pepper's there. Susie Pepper's gonna die. Except I know that Susie Pepper is not going to die because she has to eventually get with Jackson and fuck up a wedding or whatever. The whole time that like I'm watching part 1 of the finale, I'm like, they're not gonna kill Derek. Like, Derek is Meredith's husband. This is called Grey's Anatomy. Like, the show is built on the Grey McDreamy romance. So then imagine my shock when he actually does get pew-pewed. And then at that point, poor April is left there on the catwalk as Derek is like bleeding out on the floor, and she's like incredible. She basically does this like, my name is April. I have parents. I grew up on a farm. Like she starts to tell the shooter things about herself, and at that point, he lets her live, and then she gets to run away. So Meredith witnesses the moment that Derek gets shot. So she's freaking the fuck out. And Christina's like, if you're gonna go out there, you're gonna have to go through me. And Meredith actually grabs her and yanks her to the floor and sends her out of there. So I was like, all right, you know what? Girl, stand on business. So Meredith and Christina, they're able to get to Derek with the help of Susie Pepper. And then they end up finding Jackson in like one of the other rooms, because as this is going on, Teddy and Owen are trying to move one of their patients into the ICU. So they're also breaking the lockdown order. And Jackson is catching shit from Owen because it, like, earlier, Derek went into the OR and was like, okay, everybody needs to stay put. And he only tells Jackson and says, don't tell Owen and Teddy what's going on until the surgery's over. So then when Owen and Teddy do find out, Owen is like being an absolute fuckwit about it. So when Owen and Teddy leave, at this point, because y'all have already clued me into the fact that Owen lives through many things, so I'm not worried about Owen at this point. But when Owen and Teddy, they go out to do what they're going to do, Jackson is left alone. And I'm not worried about him either because he has to go and fuck up the wedding. But he runs into Christina, and then Christina's like, hey, like, we need an attending to do this, like, gunshot wound thing on Derek. Like, we are residents. We need an attending. And Jackson's like, we don't got an attending. Like, sorry. And then April's freaking out, like, we don't have like a surgeon who's going to do it. And then Jackson goes, we do have a surgeon. We have Christina. So then Christina, our queen, she's just like, April, your job is to keep Meredith in this room. That way I don't have to look at her screaming, crying face when I'm, elbow deep in her husband. And April takes this job very seriously, and she does a decent job at it. And Meredith also reads her the riot act a little bit for being like the moon-eyed intern, like crushing on her husband. So then Owen and Teddy, they get their patient out. And then Teddy does like her pick me girl act, and she's like, hey, Christina's still in there. I know you love her. Go after her. And Owen instantly does. And he runs back into the hospital. He pisses off the whole SWAT team. And he runs into the operating room. And then he sees Meredith and April on the floor. And because they were not even allowed to, like, stand up to look at what's going on in there. And April, like, explains the situation. And Owen, like, goes inside. But you could tell that Owen is seeing something that we are not seeing. And then Owen walks into the operating room, and then we find out what he already knows, which is, oh shit, the shooter's in the room, and the pew pew is at Christina's head. And Christina handles this like a motherfucking boss. Like, he's being told to stop, and Christina's like, I need you to pass me like these tools, I need you to do this, I need you to do that. And Jackson's being very smart here. Like, he's causing distractions so that the shooter will look away while he hands her tools, which is awesome. He's becoming one of my favorite characters. So, like, it's escalating and escalating and escalating, and then Owen starts getting emotional. Like, that's the woman I love. Like, dude, you were in Desert Storm. Calm the fuck down. And then Meredith runs in, and she's just like, shoot me, because everybody that you're mad at, I mean the most to them. And then Jackson, again, a major win. As the shooter is distracted by Meredith, he must knock out, like, the plug on Derek's, like, vitals computers and stuff. So, like, it makes it look like Derek is dying. And then it is pulled off, like, very, very well because, Meredith is screaming and crying on the floor. Like it's being sold very well. And then the shooter leaves the room, and then Meredith is still crying, and Christina's like, shut the fuck up. Deal with Owen, because Owen got shot during this whole thing. So I need you to go and deal with that. You deal with my man, I will deal with yours. So then they complete the surgery. Derek and Owen, they're both going to be all right. Like Derek is in a much worse situation, but like clearly they are out of the woods. And then as this is going on, Lexi and Mark are dealing with like their conflicting feelings, and then Alex, he and Lexi are like a thing now, but Alex must confuse blonde Lexi for Izzy, and then he's just like, Izzy, I'm so sorry. I wish you had never left. I love you. I love you. I love you. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so painful. That's so sad. But eventually all three of them make it out. Alex is going to be okay. And honestly, his reaction to being shot, like him just being pissed off, at that point it made me feel better. And I was like, I'm glad he's going to be okay. And then the shooter is ultimately dealt with by Richard and the SWAT team. So like all of that is handled. And we just have a lot of like traumatized doctors and patients on our hands. The saddest thing though was this fucking scene with like Mandy Moore and Bailey and this doctor that I hated. They made me not hate this doctor anymore. That was so much fucking ground to cover, but that was my after the fact reaction.